There she is.
Patricia, hi.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm so excited.
Me too.
I got all my gear ready.
Yes.
I got my helmet ready.
Yes.
I have some water ready and some wine for after the break.
Yes. I love it. I love it.
I'm going to kick you off.
Okay.
I'm going to start with a song. I usually play a song.
Great.
And we'll just take it from there. Let's see where this leads us. Okay. Where am I? Here. No, not this, not this. This one. Let's see. Stop share because I need to share the sound. And that way we'll give people the time to come in. All right.
Tenía 7 años apenas 7 años.
Where is, hold on. Nope. I want the English version of this. Yeah. There it is. Okay, here we go. And then share screen. Sound is done. And there we go.
Tenía 7 años apenas 7 años. ¿Qué 7 años? No llegaba a 5 siquiera. De pronto unas voces en la calle me gritaron negra. ¡Negra! 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 ¿Soy acaso negra? Me dije. ¡Sí! ¿Qué cosa es ser negra? ¡Negra! Yo no sabía la triste verdad que aquello escondía. ¡Negra! Y me sentí negra. ¡Negra! Como ellos decían. ¡Negra! Y retrocedí. ¡Negra! Como ellos querían. ¡Negra! Yo odié mis cabellos y mis labios gruesos y miré apenada mi carne tostada y retrocedí. ¡Negra! Y retrocedí. ¡Negra! 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 Y pasaba el tiempo y siempre amargada seguía llevando a mi espalda mi pesada carga. ¡Y cómo pesaba! Me alacé el cabello, me polvé la cara, y entre mis entrañas siempre resonaba la misma palabra. ¡Negra! 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 Hasta que un día que retrocedía y que iba a caer. ¡Negra! 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 ¿Qué? ¿Y qué? ¡Negra! ¡Sí! ¡Negra! ¡Soy! ¡Negra! ¡Negra! ¡Soy! ¡Negra! ¡Sí! ¡Negra! ¡Soy! ¡Negra! ¡Negra! ¡Soy! Yo hoy en adelante no quiero laciar mi cabello. ¡No quiero! Y voy a reírme de aquellos que por evitar, según ellos, que por evitarnos algún sinsabor llaman a los negros gente de color. ¿Y de qué color? ¡Negro! ¿Y qué lindo suena? ¡Negro! ¿Y qué ritmo tiene? ¡Negro, negro, 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 negro! Al fin comprendí. ¡Al fin! Ya no retrocedo. ¡Al fin! Y avanzo segura. ¡Al fin! Avanzo y espero. ¡Al fin! Y bendigo al cielo porque quiso Dios que negro azabache fuese mi color y ya comprendí. ¡Al fin!
You're on mute if you're talking to us, Professor Rodriguez.
Record. Okay, it's recording. Okay.
Yes.
We're good. All right, Dr. Patricia Akosua.
Yes.
We are in front of my grandfather. So you know how people these days, they called Black women queen, or there's some unapologetic Latinas, Latinx women that call themselves Latinas, like
Yeah.
like to denote empowerment.
Uh-huh.
I don't use like that language. My grandfather used to call women like you cachimbonas. That it's like, it means that like we can fuck around with you.
Oh, I like it.
Like you can't, like you just can't. So we are among the Cachimbona crew, and with everyone that is joining us as well.
Yes.
So I'm really excited to welcome you in this space. So I'm going to introduce you. What can I say about Dr. Patricia Akosua Lesesne?
Lesesne. Yes.
What I can say off the bat is that we came across each other, I believe, through our ancestors.
Yes.
I honestly believe that. And besides that personal disclaimer, Dr. Lesesne is an educational design leader. She specializes in developing and leading the implementation of educational leader and instructional coaching, curriculum programs, and pedagogy that employ an African American education for liberation approach to inspire Black learners. Her work leverages the transformative characteristics of the Black teaching tradition, something that she works on and she will explain in a bit. She's the founder of Sisters in Education Circle, which is something that I hope that will come up later on. Yeah. And prior to founding SIEC, which stands for Sisters in Education Circle, prior to founding, she has 15 years of experience teaching and district level leadership in various predominantly Black and Latinx school districts along the East Coast in the United States. She received a bachelor's degree from Harvard University, a Master of Arts in Teaching from Tufts University, and a doctorate in educational and organizational leadership from the University of Pennsylvania. And all of that information, I'm gonna copy and paste in the chat, even though everyone has seen your picture and I've sent everyone your information. So welcome, welcome, welcome. And the floor is yours. This is your casa.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so excited to see y'all's beautiful faces. And I feel, even people who are off the screen, I completely understand, but I know that you're beautiful also, and I feel your spirit here. So, you know, I put this picture from Jamaica a couple years ago so that we can all kind of internalize, right? That feeling. This was my last trip before the world shut down. I didn't know it would be my last trip before the world shut down. But this is actually, so one, I'm going to say, I just love that video. I agree with Professor Rodriguez that our ancestors definitely connected us via Facebook. And I'm so blessed and I know that this connection is strong, and I look forward to growing it. And so thank you for inviting me here. I will say something about the picture, like something that the video inspired. I love that. Like I love, you know, the chanting. I definitely want that video to show to my students here. Maybe I was thinking they could even do a musical piece, right? Like, you know, like adding that hook into a hip hop piece, I think would just be so beautiful, because you all know that anti-Blackness is global, and you know, not just anti-Blackness, anti-brownness, right? Anti-queerness, anti everything that's not cis het patriarchy and capitalism, right? And so I just love, again, like I think the ancestors definitely chose that to start us off with, and it just inspired me to tell you the story of this picture. This is actually a resort called Jackie's on the Reef outside of Negril in Jamaica, and it was built by a Black woman. She's in her 70s now, and if you go, she is still the host. So when you go, she welcomes you. 40, 50 years ago, I'm not sure how long ago, she was inspired to leave the United States. She bought this piece of land. She camped out in a tent on the land for 5 years before she was able to build this amazing resort. So what you're seeing here, a Black woman built it. And I just think that is just so beautiful and ties right into the introduction and what we're doing tonight. But it's called Jackie's on the Reef. Her name is Jackie. And so what you're seeing behind me, a Black woman built it, and it just makes me, we could talk all night about how nonsensical anti-Blackness is, because Blackness is amazing. And so, but we also know where it comes from, so we won't talk about that tonight. I did want to start off with, I'll share also one more thing that inspired me, that I was inspired by the video, is that in the United States and probably elsewhere, I'm sure in the Caribbean and likely on the continent of Africa and maybe even other communities, there's a saying, a very negative saying: if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're Black, get back. And this was a saying that actually was popular in the Black community. So we talk about internalized anti-Blackness, right? This is something that Black folks in the United States would just say. And it's like, that internalized anti-Blackness, internalized colorism. And so I have a hashtag that says Black and not getting back. And so yes, I'm Black and I'm not getting back. So those two things I'm just sharing just inspired me. I was inspired by the video to share those two things with you. But I will go ahead and start the way that the Spirit had given me, the Spirit and the ancestors had given me to start. And I will introduce myself by saying that I am the daughter of Mildred, who is the daughter of Irene, who is the daughter of Anna Cleo, who is the daughter of Sadie. We called her Grandma Sweetie. I am the daughter of Kenneth. I am the namesake of Mary Lutricia, who are the son and daughter of Katie, who is the daughter of Sarah, who is the daughter of Emma Evelyn. Ashe. That is my introduction, and I invite all of those ancestors into this space. I invite you to invite your ancestors into this space. Feel free to put it in the chat or just, recall them internally, call their names out. We're all on mute. You can call their names out loud. But speaking of Blackness, Black people, and Black women, I invite all of those Black women into this space with me tonight. And so and again, feel free to, I'm really bad at chatting and talking. So feel free though to, however you'd like to insert their names and their presence into the space, including typing names into the chat, please feel free to do that. And just know that my Spirit is acknowledging them with you. Professor Rodriguez, did you want to say something?
We are convocating people from different parts of the globe, from unceded territories to occupied states, to failed states. We're convocating from our particular regions, other people as well. Yes,
please. Thank you. And we certainly need the power of our ancestors in this moment. Certainly. So thank you so much. And I invite and can actually feel and acknowledge each and every one of their spirits, even those who you are holding in your heart and reverberating out. So thank you so much. So you heard my bio. And what I'm going to do is really just tell you the story of what it has been to be a Southern Black American in the United States and the descendant of Southern Black Americans on both sides, and how my educational story has influences my work. Right? It's not separate. So I'll start by saying that the last name Lesesne is literally the name of a slaveholding family in South Carolina. So my father, my great grandfather, and his brothers and sisters were enslaved by a family with the last name Plowden in Sumter, South Carolina. Just for reference, South Carolina is the state that I think their governor, I just saw a headline. I try not to read every headline, but I just saw a headline that their governor is officially acknowledging the Confederate holiday in 2021 by raising the Confederate flag in South Carolina. And so that's 2021. So imagine what my family experienced from the inception of, having been kidnapped from West Africa and brought to the United States, to Sumter, South Carolina. And so my great grandfather and his brothers and sisters were enslaved by the Plowden family in Sumter, South Carolina. It's so interesting, and I say here in the United States, but I also recognize that there are so many similarities to subjugation, right, around the country. And so I very much invite you to also educate me around the similarities. Yes, Lark is saying in South Carolina is now bringing back the firing squad for the death penalty. So yeah, in 2021. So that gives you an idea of what my ancestors, so I come from the ancestral lands here in the United States prior to West Africa of South Carolina. So thank you for that context, because you understand, you understand, and you see where we come from. So they were enslaved by the family, European American family with the last name Plowden. At emancipation, they decided that they did not want to take the names of their enslavers, and which is cool. But then the other interesting thing is that Lesesne was also a slaveholding family, and they say he was a nice slave owner. I don't know what that means. I don't think there's such a thing. But they walked down the street. Well, I'm sure it was more than a street, but they walked to his plantation and asked if they could take his last name. And so we became the Lesesne family. There are some members of my family who kept the Plowden last name, but Lesesne is literally the name of a slave-owning family. But my family, on my father's side, were enslaved by a family whose last name was Plowden in South Carolina. I don't have that history as far back from my mother's side, but that side of the family, my ancestral lands, second to West Africa, from which my ancestors were kidnapped, is Georgia. So I got it from both ends, y'all, right? So South Carolina and Georgia, and that's, that is my lineage. To get into what I call the Black teaching tradition a little bit, half of my family spells their name the way it sounds, which is Lesane, Lesesne, and the other half spells it this funny way that I spell it, Lesesne. And this is actually a beautiful story that hints to the freedom fighters who were Black American teachers in the South. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what Black American teachers did, the pedagogy that they enacted. In fact, there's a historian, that Dr. Jarvis Givens at Harvard, who just released a really exciting book in this area, and he calls it fugitive pedagogy. How beautiful is that? I'm like, you took all my words, sir. So, fugitive pedagogy. And so, as you can imagine, this history is overlooked, right? And so in the United States, the narrative is that Black people never valued education. We're not educable. We don't care about education. So of course we need these white saviors to come in, to get all this money to come in and really subjugate us with their bad ideas around education. But we know that it's not true. We know that it's not true. Part of our narrative is that during enslavement in the United States, enslaved Africans literally dug pits large enough for people to go into the pit and have school. They were called pit schools, and this was during enslavement, when they could be amputated, lynched, castrated for learning to read. And so during enslavement on plantations, they dug pits big enough for whole-bodied people to get into the pit and learn, and anyone who knew how to read would teach the other enslaved persons how to read. And so anyway, back to the Lesesne story. The reason why half of my family spells it Lesane is because they went to a school, these one-room schoolhouse that African Americans. So that whole idea of mixed grade, there's no in the United States and probably around the world, there's no educational strategy or instructional strategy that this class of Black freedom-fighting educators did not already enact, right? So you know how that goes, right? So indigenous folks, folks of color, subjugated folks come up with an idea, but because the narrative is that we're not intelligent, we're not complex, and also because of capitalism, right? Because in the United States, Black people literally were capital, and across the globe, folks will steal the idea, right? Package it, sell it back to school districts for billions of dollars. But then when they sell it back, it has taken the liberatory sting out of it, right? So like project-based learning, experiential education, you can't name one thing, in my opinion, not just my opinion, in my analysis, you can't name one popular educational philosophy that some likely white person hasn't gotten rich off of selling back to Black and Latinx districts, that these pedagogical geniuses, and that's what I call them, that this class of pedagogical geniuses did not already do, right? If it wasn't experiential education, if it wasn't social justice education, if it wasn't experiential education, what was it? Right? I mean, it reminds me of Michelle Ndege Ocello. I don't know if any of you like her music or know of her. She came out, I love this. She came out at a conference, at a concert, and she said, if Elvis Presley is the king of rock and roll, who the fuck is James Brown? God? Right? And so I'm making the same analysis, right? Like, if project-based learning, social justice education, competency-based education, if these are supposedly the leading, educational instructional strategies that we can sell to Black and Latinx districts, for literally billions of dollars, like literally here, the textbook industry behind porn and the NFL is the textbook industry, $1 billion industry. And so if they're selling innovative strategies, then what were Black educators? Fucking pedagogical gods? Like what? like what? So just say that to give you some perspective here, right? Like really look into those pedagogical strategies, because they really held up generations and generations and generations of people. That no one trumps these what I call Black pedagogical genius. No one trumps them in pedagogy. No one. And I'm sure that it's true for marginalized and subjugated folks all over the globe. I don't want to speak outside of my area of expertise. I'm 100% sure, though, that it's true for the indigenous population here. I'm 100% sure that pedagogical genius exists among all marginalized people on the globe. And so I just want to, encourage us to tell the story and to tell it right, and to not lie or accept the lie about it. So I'm running my mouth. I still haven't told you the Lesesne story. I am going to get back to it. So getting back to why half of my family spells it Lesane. Again, the power of these Black teachers, right? So generations previous, someone in my family, some of my elders in my family, are probably ancestors now, went to school. And there was a Black school teacher in the segregated schooling, in the segregated schools, usually one-room schoolhouses. And I think that's when I started to say this whole like mixed classroom stuff. Enslaved people have been doing that forever, right? Like, I'm telling you, there's no instructional strategy that has not been perfected by this class of educators. So those ancestors went to school, and their Black school teacher, who was part of the family, revered in the community, as many of these Black teachers were in their generations, said, "That's not how you spell Lesesne." And they were like, "Okay." And so that entire branch of the family started spelling it Lesane. And that part of my, so our family reunion T-shirts literally say Lesesne, 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 Lesane. And so like she just shifted that entire course of our family. Every 2 years since the 70s, that side of my family has been having family reunions. They're more like conferences. I didn't realize that until one year I was asked to be their family reunion speaker. In the history of those family reunions since the 70s, they had never had a relative who was a speaker. So it's usually like a high-level speaker. And so one year they asked me to be the speaker at the banquet. And I posted like the itinerary. And I was like, "Oh, hey, guys, here's the itinerary for my family reunion." And they were like, "Sis, what the hell are y'all doing over there? This is not, we have some hot dogs and a grill and maybe like a fun house. You guys have entire, they're like, this is a family reunion." And I literally thought that was everybody's family reunion. I mean, we literally have a genealogist come. We have family historian. And so I'm just grateful that side of the family has taken that very seriously. So I didn't know. I thought that that's what family reunions were since the 70s. But that teacher came to our family reunion every year until she passed away. And so, I think that story in and of itself, Lark is like, "Nah, sis, that's not what we're doing." I think that story in and of itself just tells you the importance of this professional class of freedom fighters in the United States. I mean, these folks risk their literally would be have their houses bombed, schools burned down if it was found out that they were teaching anything except for the industrial education, right? Because enslavement ends here in this country, and all of a sudden, white folks are like, "Who's gonna pick our cotton?" Right? There is no American economy. So let me back up and say that, as a Black American, as a person of African descent, I am a stolen person on stolen land. So let me back up and recognize that the indigenous folks here in the United States and around the country, I don't mean to be exclusive, I'm just talking about my context. I heard this the other day, and it's the whole truth. Are survivors of an attempted genocide. And we just need to sit with that for a minute. That they're survivors of an attempted, it was genocide that was being attempted. And so when European settlers came to this land, I just read the other day, I mean, the number changes, but I think it was like 100 million people were here. And through European violence, 90% of that population was disappeared violently, right? You don't disappear that many people non-violently. So I want to absolutely acknowledge that I'm speaking as a stolen person on stolen land. And I read an article that said that so many indigenous people were killed by European settlers that it literally cooled down the earth. It literally changed the temperature. And I will find all these, well, that's not true. I was going to say, I'm going to find all these references and send them to Professor Rodriguez. We're in quarantine. I might not. like today, I have on my head wrap and my makeup. I'm doing good today. So, but these are credible sources. I'm sure if you Google some of the keywords, you'll find them. I'll try to send them if they're, at my fingertip, but I'm not going to overpromise. But yes, I read that article that said that so many indigenous folks, that European settlers killed so many indigenous folks that it literally cooled the temperature of the earth down, right? Why is that conversation not in climate change? Now, why is that not a part of the climate change conversation, right? So I just wanted to, I felt important for me to take time to position myself, to say that first, yes, we were stolen and brought here, but we are also on the land, drenched with not only our blood, but drenched with the blood of the ancestors of those who survived that genocide. And so, what was happening during enslavement, with enlightenment, with education, as I mentioned, enslaved Africans valued education, right? And thank you, Vicki, valued education, valued knowledge for the sake of knowledge. And so I think one point I want to make as I introduce the Black teaching tradition is that it needs to, just like every other teaching tradition, needs to stand on its own, because it really is its own thing. And quite honestly, nothing, and I'll say this flat-footed, like nothing Europeans have ever done when it comes to education even compares, and I'm sure, to the Black teaching tradition. And so even looking at it through the lens of European, no, get that out of here, right? It's like you would be doing it a disservice to look at it through the lens of European, like go somewhere with that, right? And so I do, really urge you not only, first and foremost, to look at and honor the pedagogical traditions of your ancestors, right? And know that, I'm saying the same thing about those, right? That even though my mom was not afforded a formal education beyond vocational school, my mama is a pedagogical genius, and I acknowledge that. Right? How can you not be, being a Black woman born in 1948 in Eastman, Georgia? How do you make it from 1948 to 2021 in this country, raising Black children and not being a pedagogical genius? You don't. Now, her genius doesn't make it into schools. Her genius can't be packaged, right, and sold to Black and Latinx school districts for billions of dollars. But guess what? We'd be better off as it could. Because even thinking about my mom, I was a teenage mother. I had a child when I was in the 7th grade. So here, that's 12 years old here. My mother mothered both of us so geniusly and so brilliantly that if she were afforded a formal education, she would be a foremost child psychologist. I say that flat. I mean, the love, the compassion, the way she scaffolded, if we want to use technical words, right? The way she scaffolded that experience, the way she attended to my humanity, the way she attended to my daughter's humanity. All of this having lost, and the statistics here, right? All of this as a Black woman having lost 2 of her husbands. My father died in a car accident. Her first husband died of cancer, right? And we know that those statistics are not separate from white domination, right? Migrating from, growing up, and she would tell me, in her time, primarily, but not exclusively, men would just disappear. And if your husband, nephew, uncle disappeared and didn't come back, that he was lynched, right? This is not uncommon stuff. This was the order of the day, right? So the way that American history is written, mainstream American history is written, it's like, oh, it's those bad people over there lynching people. This was the order of the day. And so I'm coming back to say that even though my mom wasn't a formal educator, you don't make it from 1948 to 2021 as a Black woman, having raised 3 children, and this, then I had the nerve to have a child, right? 3 children and a grandchild only 12 years younger. You don't make it without being a pedagogical genius. You don't. And then I also give the example of, what do you think enslaved Africans were doing in the bottom of those boats? When if I was torn away from my mom, what do you think that adults who were chained next to children, and they know that as an adult, this child just lost his mother, right? All of those kinship ties, that's pedagogical genius. Our taking care of Black children and white children, but that's not what this lecture is about, right? Our taking care of all of the children in the United States in such a way that was so sophisticated while we're under subjugation, and then to come up with strategies that have been unparalleled. And that's my claim, strategies that are unparalleled in the mainstream, right? And so my research doesn't go back that far, but I will say that our pedagogical genius began there, right? I mean, we as parents, even, probably especially in the quarantine, but I'm sure even before, we know what it is to have to take care of children when we have everything we need. But what if when our lives are in danger every day and I still have to take care of this child? And what I'm saying to you is that Black children, Black parents, Black aunties, Black uncles, and certainly this class of Black educators in the United States, we did that. We did it. And we continue to do it. Now, here in the United States, Black teachers only make up 6.8% of all school teachers in the nation. Black principals are only 11% of all principals in the nation. That's to say nothing of superintendents and on and on and on. I have an elder, Rachel Elizabeth Harding, who's an amazing woman. You should look her up. And I always post about it. Professor Rodriguez knows. I always post about this stuff on Facebook. And one time I posted about the lack of Black teachers and how Black teachers are literally being pushed out of the field. And she said it is, or maybe she was responding to an article, because here in the United States, you'll find lots of articles now. It's a public conversation about where are all the Black teachers going, why are there so few Black teachers, experiences with Black teachers. And she said, what she said was, this has been intentional and it's bad for democracy. That the pushing out of Black teachers of our schools is absolutely intentional. And as an educator who now has my own, I work independently in support of Black and Latinx students, it's absolutely true. Because educational institutions are one of the primary sites of subjugation. So when you have a Black teacher who is liberatory minded, of course, all of a sudden you have all these reasons, right, not to want them in the school. Now, one thing that people don't, and certainly not as principals, right, certainly not as superintendents. And I will say, as you know, my experiences within schools is that even a slightest hint at liberatory pedagogy gets you alienated. Even like not real radical stuff, like even just the slightest, like, oh hey, why don't we say the machine starts going, right? And then all of a sudden, oh, well, she's incompetent, or you guys know how it works, right? And that's more around the contemporary being pushed out. What I will say is an important point of history around this is that in the first 10, 11 years after desegregation, legal desegregation, they laid off 40,000 Black teachers. 40,000. That's a point. Some people are nodding their heads, so it sounds like you guys know that. But that's a point of history that folks should know, that anyone should know who's doing any type of real analysis around what's happening in schools, right? Because of course, then the narrative becomes, oh, well, Black people don't want to be teachers, right? You see how it goes, right? It's not talking about the racism, not talking about those who, it's not talking about those who apply and are not hired because they don't fit, right? So there's an entire narrative about Black adults, same as there's an entire narrative about Black students, right? Because language matters, right? So the language keeps the white supremacist machine going. They're making more money now, so they don't want to go into teaching. What do you like? And people just say this stuff and like pulls it out of their ass. Like, where did you get that from? Like, but it's like right on their tongues, though, right? But you get how that goes. So, very quickly, and Professor Rodriguez, tell me, so I know we want to have a discussion, because I've been talking, just kind of talking. I do want to tell you a little bit about the Black teaching tradition, like the framework I came up with, and then I can stop for discussion. Does that make sense? Am I okay? Okay. All right. Yes, the Malcolm Blackwell, it's a Gladwell or Blackwell piece is really important. So thank you guys for putting that in there. And so, so what I did for my dissertation is there's at least six generations of scholarship on excellent Black teachers, right? But you may not have heard of it because that's not popular, right? Like if you're making billions of dollars and you're getting billions of dollars in grants saying that you're the white savior and you're the ones who should come in and save Indigenous and Black and Latinx students, it's not a popular narrative to say, well, actually it's Black teachers, right? Black teachers and Black administrators who have been the most affected. And so this scholarship is about 6 generations deep, right? So ethnographic studies on these segregated schools, historical analysis of individual historical figures, about 6 generations deep, and it continues. But you won't read about that in teacher preparation schools, right? You don't, it's not a part of the popular narrative. And so autocorrect. What I did was I did a lit review on that body of literature. And I did it from a teacher development standpoint. And I said, like, what are the pedagogical, what are the pedagogical elements that make up these teachers' teaching? And I came up with 9 salient elements. And I'm happy to share this I will share that with Professor Rodriguez. I have a short summary, like a 1-pager that has the elements and the descriptions, right? And so there are these salient elements. High, and I'll just name a couple for you. High expectations, right? That goes against the stereotype, though, right? Right. Professional expertise, when it comes to their roles with Black students. So I broke it down to characteristics, which is like their core values around their practice, right? So characteristics, roles, which dictates their relationship with students and community, and embodiment. And I'll send this to you, but I'll just say it very quickly now. So the characteristics are high expectations and professional expertise. The roles are, they position themselves as an advocate, a bridge, a community member / extended family member. So advocate, bridge, community member / extended family member, right? That those embodiments dictate their relationships with communities and schools and parents and children. And then embodiment. So these are the principles that dictate their daily instructional priorities and decisions, right? So actions, right? So their embodiments are believing. So there's an unwavering belief in the intellectual prowess and value and humanity of Black people, right? Caring, right? So there's that ethic of care, that they actually love their students, right? So believing, caring, overcoming. So that speaks to this idea that as a Black teacher, your destiny is intertwined with your Black students. And so you approach the instructional strategies in a way that says, we're going to overcome these obstacles together. But the European lens would turn that into something like soft, right? Something that's anti-intellectual. It's highly intellectual. I mean, well, it doesn't even just have to be intellectual. It's spiritual, right? It's communal, it's cultural, but it's highly intellectual because, again, back to that slave ship, right? I have to figure out how I'm daily going to get you out of this situation and get myself out of the situation. So the way I interact with you is all of my pedagogical priorities, I'm consistently thinking about how do we overcome together, and how pedagogically as your teacher, how do I create the skills, the knowledge, the relationships to help you overcome, right? I feel like I've missed some. I always do. I can pull, was that 9? I saw some people taking notes. I can pull it up very quickly so to make sure at least that you have all of them. But you see what I did there. That's the basis of it. And I will stop talking now. Sorry, I feel like I went over.
You were fine. You were fine. With time. But I'm going to heart you because that was, I just feel like we just received a wonderful gift. The readings for this week are something to the effect, I have it right here. You probably read it already. It's about pedagogy. It's a book by Paulo Freire about pedagogy of freedom, about ethics.
Yes.
And then the other text that we had this week was that Stuart Hall's piece about the West and the Rest.
Yeah, I saw those.
So I just kind of feel like we can take it for a trip. And based on what you told us, so what I would like to propose is I would like to open up the floor because I would like the participants to be in dialogue with you and ask or make comments, because I'm sure that there are plenty. So please go ahead.
Yes, I'm ready.
Do it. Let's go.
And I'm just typing the elements in the chat, and then, like I said, I'll share the document with you all that has all the elements in the description.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Come on, I'm the baby girl.
I have a question. This is Lark.
Hi, Lark.
Okay, my question is, I often get questions from, beginning teachers, and I always, and for people of color, like specifically like Black, Indigenous, Latinx people, I always say. They're like, I can't make a difference. I can't do anything. They keep blocking me. And I'm like, you should get a PhD. You have to, I don't know, like, is that okay? I mean, I'm just kind of like wondering, is that advice okay? I mean, am I not bashing, but like, what do you think about that? Like, should you stick it out? Or, because we do need people in the classroom teaching the children, but at the same token, we're teaching this kind of, colonizer, settler, white supremacist, capitalist pedagogy, and we're not building. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I can't hear you.
Oh yeah, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry. That's such a good question. I don't think that there's one answer. I think and this is going to sound like really hokey, but it's not coming from a hokey place. You know, I think sometimes, like Zora Neale Hurston says, some years, some time periods ask questions and some time periods answer questions. So she says some years ask questions and some years answer questions. And I think it's less about in this season, I think it's less about the answer to our questions but it's more about the type of questions we're asking about the state of Black education and Indigenous and Latinx education in the United States. And, you know, we need to get real with ourselves, right? That schools are sites of terror. And they're sites of terror. Schools are sites of terror for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous children, and also Black, Latinx, and Indigenous adults. And so then the question becomes, given that truth, what questions do we need to be asking ourselves, right? I remember I was at a dinner with, I'm very humbled by the experience, with Bob Moses. And I remember asking Bob Moses actually a very similar question. Like, well, do we need to get, you know, PhDs? And what Bob Moses said was, you know, I mean, you can get a PhD if you want. Like, you know, there's nothing wrong with a PhD. But he said, but during the freedom fight, we didn't have PhDs. We had Fannie Lou Hamer. This is what he said to me. And I was like, oh, right? And so again, that's not my answer to you, but I think during these times, we need to be asking the right questions. And the right question begins with a courageous assessment of where we are. And where we are is that the white power priorities have taken hold of schools as sites of terror for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous children and adults. So then if that's our reality, then what questions, so the PhD question may or may not be the question, but what questions do we then need to ask ourselves in the face of that reality? Is that helpful?
I have two screens, so it's weird. I'm looking at you. Yeah, that is helpful. I mean, I kind of give an answer. I don't know if it's like similar, but I'm just kind of like, oh, it's such a big question, you know? I don't want to discourage people, but like you said, we have to like assess our situation. It's kind of like, can you teach in the middle of a war? Like, you know, what are you going to do? They're shooting at you. Like, I don't know how you're going to teach in that. Maybe you need to like do something, whatever, you know. But yeah, thank you so much.
Sure. And our ancestors did, you know, I mean, literally the story that I told you of, I mean, there's a couple, I don't know if they were both principals or a principal and a teacher, their house was bombed because they successfully fought for, in Florida, they successfully fought for equal pay for Black teachers, right? And so, you know, but again, so given that reality, what questions do we need to be asking ourselves? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's real. The trauma is real. I mean, the terror, it's trauma, but it's terror. I mean, white power forces have perfected terror. And it's wholly, from pre-service all the way up, it's wholly taken hold of the schooling experiences. Thank you for your presence and for speaking. Do you see Asian American educators aligning and working with Black, Latinx, Indigenous educators? That's a great question. And then someone else had their hand up. I'm trying to get better at like seeing all the cues, and I don't remember the name. Before I answer that question, I will also go back to Lark's question. And what I will tell you about my doctoral experience is that it completely broke me down. So I told you that I was I'm still recovering. My therapist was like, it's going to take you 3 to 6 months to like just be a semblance of yourself again. And so I told you all that I was a teenage mom, and I was also a gifted student, et cetera, et cetera. School, I loved learning. And so it kind of became an escape for me, and not just an escape, it became a way of humanizing myself, feeling human, because, I had teachers. I mean, I had some teachers who were jerks, but I had many teachers who insisted on focusing on my intellectual capacity as a human being. And that made me feel human, right? Aww. And my doctoral experience took that away for the first time in my life at 46 years old. The forces in my doctoral program took that away from me and completely broke me down. To the point where, I have a friend who is, traditional Christian, and which is a community that I came from, but I've moved away from it a bit. I'm saying that to say that he fasts. I don't. I be hungry. So he fasting is one of his spiritual practices. And he talked to me one day through that experience and went to his wife and his family and said, I've never heard her like this. And he asked his entire family to pray and fast for me through my doctoral defense process. And I knew that I had been broken down, but to hear someone who knows you say like, nah, and to have his wife and entire family like, yeah, no, I don't quite understand what's happening, so again, more questions than answers, but I think these are years that are asked, that ask questions of us. So, Asian, this question comes to mind, that Asians can be racist towards. Yeah. So, my experience. So what I will say, I have not, I in this moment, in 15 years of education, I actually can't even really recall an Asian colleague. And so I don't know if that speaks to the population of teachers, in urban schools or in my settings, or where I've been physically, geographically. But generally speaking, in my networks and friends who I make on Facebook, I would say very few. I mean, like by very few, I can literally think of one of my Facebook friends who's Asian and is consistent about solidarity and consistent about, but again, it's a very small sample. And that's my experience. Yeah, absolutely. In this doctoral program I was talking about, it was actually one of the staff members who really made it difficult for me was, an Asian American woman who insisted that she was in solidarity and a woman of color, and she participated in the white power forces that really broke me down during this process. So again, just my experience. And, of my Facebook friends, I know one Asian American who's consistent. And there is absolutely anti-Blackness and colorism. Colorism is anti-Blackness, but anti-Blackness, absolutely. Yeah. Not just Asian communities. I mean, there's, colorism in Latin American communities is ridiculous. Anti-Blackness, even among other Black immigrants, can be ridiculous. It's a very interesting dynamic here in the United States. Again, my experience, not saying it as an expert, but that's been my experience.
Okay, unmuted. Okay, I don't know if I have questions. Again, I'm just thinking out loud, you know, in this short space we have. I don't always have time to reflect and come up with well choreographed questions, and I apologize. She's not being harmed, I promise.
No apologies. I love it. Those are the sounds of life. I love it.
Yeah, lots of what you're saying resonates with me because I am an educator in the public system here, and I had to leave the classroom. Not that I wanted to, but I felt it was becoming very claustrophobic in many ways. And when you speak of these liberatory practices, you know, that Black teachers, and I'm speaking from my own experience, you know, sort of parallel with their students about coming out of the struggle is so real that you know, I've taken on so many students and other colleagues of mine ask why I'm doing that hard work, you know, and it's, to me, it's not even a question. It's part of who I am. Right. I don't see it as work or hard work at that. And I feel that's something that some educators will never understand. But the board that I'm coming from is currently under investigation from the Ministry of Education here in the province of Ontario. It is the second largest school board in the country. And part of the reason, or the main reason they're under investigation, is because of their entrenched practices of colonialism that specifically targets and harms Black youth. Yep. Right? And so they've been publishing reports and data more recently, and the Black community is like, you know, these are things that we've been crying for and talking about for years. We do not need your researchers coming into the community, publishing report after report and putting out data to tell us about our experience, and then for you to sit at that same table, you know, annihilating us and coming up with whatever strategies you think, which now, unfortunately, our provincial government has sort of piggybacked on and saying that now they're going to be making sure that everyone in education is kind of undergoing some sort of anti-Black racism training. And now that I've been removed from the classroom a little bit, hold on, sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
It's fine.
Okay. As I was saying that I've been able to sit at many different tables, not just educator tables now, union tables, community tables, with teachers, with, you know, government officials, and the stories are not aligning, and what people need are not aligning. You know, and the community is struggling to understand what this government, you know, is doing, that they're putting out words and plans, but there's nothing behind the plan. So for example, I sat at a union table last week for teachers in the province, and the union rep specifically asked, you know, from your experience as educators working in boards across the province, what have your boards been doing for anti-Black racism to occur? And nobody can come up with any sort of, you know, actionable things that school boards have been doing. In fact, some school boards have been re-entrenching based on some of the actions that they're taking. Right? Anyways, I didn't really have any questions. I just wanted to talk through that because what you're saying is so real, right?
Yeah, no, it is, and it's global. It's global, and you know, schools are absolutely a site of subjugation, and an arm of white power forces. I'm putting information about the retreats. This is an education circle. I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but it's one of the things I did in response to my experiences, which is put together a retreat for Black women impacting PK through 16 education. And so it's costly, but it's worth it. And also there's some scholarships available. So I'm just putting that in the chat.
Could I ask a question?
Of course.
Yes, please go ahead. Yes. Everyone who's listening, please, this is your moment.
So, you know, I think it was Lark who asked the question about encouraging people to go into, you know, to get a PhD, and then hearing your heart-wrenching story about how you were treated. And it's really a dilemma that, like, I after retiring from teaching, I got a PhD in my late 50s. And I literally did use that mantra, get out, as quickly as I could to save my soul, right? And so, but now I ask myself, you know, like, what's the purpose of it all? Should I go back into a K-12 setting where I think that's the trenches? But hearing that there is so much ugliness that goes on in the university level, and I feel like there need to be voices who are unafraid to, you know, call out some of this shit, because you should not have to break a human being to give them a diploma. Like, and so I just wanted to ask you about that, because, you know, I guess the real question I have, where's the most impact? You know, from your vantage point, where is the most impact for an educator these days?
Yeah, I think just to respond to one thing you said is that, to be clear, they're not breaking everybody who goes through the process. Mediocre white folks typically have no problem getting through the process.
Yes to that.
Who aren't talking about anything, who aren't doing anything, and can get through with a really racist premise, right? Like, so again, getting clear that this is about subjugation. It's about subjugation. And then, you know, I also will say, I'm feeling more and more that we need to bring in the organization arm, organizing, advocacy, get in the streets. You know, I don't think that's everybody's role. So I think what I'm saying is, you know, find your role for the particular time, because we absolutely still do need people in the classrooms. I mean, at 6.8%, think about the terror that happened, right? And I don't have the statistics on Indigenous and Latinx, which I'm sure maybe even less, right, or comparable teachers. I mean, think about the type of terror that goes on every day in schools when you don't have Black and Latinx and Indigenous adults in those buildings, right? So some of us need to be in the building. Some of us are, you know, anointed and protected by the ancestors to be there, at least for a time, right? So we need to occupy every space for the time period that we can, right? Because think about when we're not there, right? And then also I would say we got to bring in the organizing arm. We got to get in the streets about this, I think. And I say that as someone who, you know, who is needing to learn organizing and to build that muscle. But that's my inclination, that it needs to be policy. It needs to be elected officials. Our bodies need to be in those buildings. We need to insist that more Black and Latinx and Indigenous people are in these buildings. And I feel like we got to make some noise too. We have to tap into that organizing tradition.
Akib, you were next.
Yeah, for sure. Peace, y'all. Thanks so much for sharing your time with us this evening. Similarly, it's not a well put together question, so I apologize in advance. Right? It's more of a thought.
Yeah.
I think, and it's interesting you're talking about organizing too, and organizing spaces and making shift in that realm. That's a space that I operate in, right? And I see a lot of folks entering awakening in this space to conversations around race, around gender, around class, around equity, around education, right? And oftentimes folks entering this space are missing some of that analysis that you're talking about, and that history, which is so important, right? And without that analysis and history, that oftentimes can push harm. And a lot of these folks are pushing it very loudly,
Yeah.
They're well-intentioned, right? Let's put that there, right? And on the other side of that coin, right, you have folks in academia, in education, right? You got incredible educators of color, right? Across class, gender, etc. Who also, because academia can be so all-consuming of your time, your heart, your soul, that you're also disconnected.
Yeah.
Right, and you've lost touch with the streets and with the movement and with what's going on, and you can also push harm and push it loudly and push it in the institutions that you're a part of now, right? And like,
yeah.
I think that's what I'm trying to think of, like how from your vantage point, right? Talking about strengthening that organizing muscle, all these things. How do we start bridging these gaps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or I don't even know that's the right question, but
yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And again, I'm just, I think that's a good question, right? I think that's a question that this time period is asking us. And I'm just thinking with you, not giving you an answer, but thinking with you. I think about, the Black Panther Party here, right? And across the globe, actually, there's Black Panther parties across the globe. There was a deep study element, right? It wasn't just what you saw, it was deep study that was a part of it. I can completely relate to what you're saying because, there are Black neoliberals here in my context that I'm like, and every single one of them has a podcast. I'm like, can y'all they're creating so much content. And so I asked myself with you, like, you don't want to be like tit for tat, right? But when you like, they just are prolific. It's like just do all, and then like they get together and like have joint podcasts, and so so the only thing they have funding, good, and they're white sponsored, they're typically it's white sponsored funding, and so Akib, did I say your name correctly? Okay. I would what I'm doing, where my spirit is leading me to, is looking to what that study arm of these movements, not just the Black Panther Party, but I'm thinking about the Black Panther Party, what that study arm required, right? And I also am thinking as well, we can't really keep silent, especially since other people are so prolific. I don't have the energy to correct everything they say, but I do wonder if maybe, I'm speaking to myself, if I do need to come out of my comfort zone and be a little bit more vocal, at least so that when someone Googles something, there's something to counter it, right? Or I don't know, but mostly I'm saying you're right.
Kira, you're next.
Here we go.
I see Gloria's hand as well after Kira. Yeah, go ahead.
I admit mine is kind of the same too, Key, but it's a little bit more of like a thought down to a question. But I have worked in the past specifically more with Indigenous students and communities, but in my experience, kind of creating the trust with family about the institution has been really hard in my role. And I do think that like the family is often the first step for the student, and like, like where they come from and all that. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are, or like experiences in bringing like family into the education conversation when we don't always even like stand behind the values of the institution or the school system that we might be working with or associated with, or don't feel that it like reflects or is relevant to our populations or communities. So that's just something that I've struggled with in the past, is like, I want to bring in more of like students from my communities, but their parents don't even trust that like the education system will do them like any good, if you know what I mean.
I do. Again, just thinking with you and trying to formulate, what's the question right behind that? What's the question that we need to be asking ourselves? One question I hear is, is it possible to educate and engage in an institution where you don't believe in the values of the institution, right? And these are not judgmental, and I definitely don't have the answer, right? These are just the questions that are coming to me. And then also just thinking about that fugitive pedagogy framework that I think is so brilliant. I carry the book around the house with me, like it's so brilliant. And Dr. Givens talks about this fugitivity as a positionality, right? And how we position ourselves as educators. And so I wonder, I wonder what fugitivity would tell us, right? If we see ourselves as fugitive pedagogues, right? What question would it ask here, and then what would it tell us to do, right? Because these were people, again, who were fired, houses bombed for teaching Latin instead of teaching industrial education, right? Because that's how serious the white power force is about not doing their own work, right? And so, yes, thank you. And in this book, Dr. Givens cites a particular time period. He's not the only one. Like, he comes from a long line of historians and educationalists who have documented this time period. His book is the most recent, but there's quite a bit out there. I mean, he says, like, I forget the time period, but like something like 600 Black schools were burned to the ground, because that's how much of a threat liberatory education is to the white power force, right? And so what does that mean, right? So I'm responding to you by saying, like, what questions does that then position you to ask about how and where you are positioned?
Thank you.
Thank you. It's real, though. I'm not in the classroom, right? I mean, I'm speaking to you as someone who had to step away and come at it differently because I was too much of a target, and it became unbearable. Gloria?
Okay. Well, I have like this, well, not exactly a question, but wondering how to create access and equity without being assimilated into white academia. And I'm thinking like about my story, how my whole research was done on pirated software, and instead of actual book, we had photocopies. I'm from Monterrey, Mexico. My university is actually a decent university, but we still had that difficulty of not being able to compete with any public university.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. So, like, even with my PhD, I'm not able to cross over the border because it's not valid by the APA.
Right.
My PhD in psychology, even though it was funded by the CONACYT, it's not translatable to work internationally.
Yeah.
It doesn't hold the same value.
Yeah.
So, and also I'm thinking that the whole academic process that I went through had this unspoken purpose of making me more white and not more authoritative in my field.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To make me think like a white person.
Mm-hmm. Which is not, anyway, sorry. Yeah. I don't want to minimize the differences between your positionality and those of us who are positioned differently. And at the same time, I will say, fuck them. I'm so tired of the mediocrity, right? I'm so tired of these fake standards of excellence. It's not even a standard. It's not even like, it doesn't even hold water. Like, once you really dig into, like, well, what are you actually saying now? you know? And so, create your own damn standards. And again, I don't want to minimize, because I recognize that there are real barriers, right? Because, the United States is an imperialist nation. And at the same time, I come from enslaved folks on this land. Fuck them. And don't spend your time. Toni Morrison says that racism is a distraction from your real work. It's a distraction because that's all they have. It literally is all they have. It literally is. Racism is about the right to be as mediocre as I can possibly be and get as much of the stuff as I can possibly get. It's moral mediocrity. Thank you, Alexandra. It's moral mediocrity. It's imaginative mediocrity. That word moral mediocrity I got from one of my favorite writers of the time, Kiese Layman. Imagine. But for him, it's moral. Like, you're morally mediocre. Like, you don't even, And then the longer time goes on, it's like I'm meeting folks who are less than mediocre. I'm like, how is this possible? Like, you ain't even mediocre, bro. Like, I'm so confused. Like, fuck them. Fuck them. Build your shit. Do what your ancestors are calling you to do. And I don't know if that's helpful, but that's the bag I'm in right now.
I just need to laugh,
Right.
I just literally just need to just laugh.
You're like, fuck you. What are you talking about? Why are you over here talking to me? I got shit to do. What? Leave me alone. And I know that, again, I don't want to minimize positionality. I don't want to minimize, because, white power forces are wholly violent, and I'm in a position of, I'm in danger, but not as much in danger, right, as folks around the country. But I still think the answer is the same. Like, fuck you. Like, go do something, because what's most important is that we create what we need to create for our children, for ourselves, whether it's acknowledged or not. Because, even, and I remember, you heard the institutions that I went to. I remember walking around on campus and being like, this is a fucking hologram. It's not even real. It's not even real. And the level of mediocrity, moral and otherwise, that's allowed in those places is despicable. So you're trying to get approval from some shit that ain't even real. They made that shit up.
Yeah. Something that you got me thinking, like now it's, can you hear me? Because I was having audio, okay.
Yes.
Something that you got me thinking about, well, I'm on all the things. Now you give me a headache, which is good. I love headaches. I welcome headaches. And that's what I usually tell, when people ask me what I do for a living. It's like I give headaches and I get headaches in return, right? But one of the things that you got me thinking about was I was visualizing all the times that when I was doing my PhD, we were told that we needed to attend all of these conferences, and 99.999% of those conferences that I've ever went to as a grad student were of white presenters, right? And the funny thing was that, and I addressed a letter actually to Latin men, Latino, men of color in my book, because I also call them out, because what I remember from grad school is that the Latino men, or the men of color and the Black men that were sort of in different cohorts across the university, they would kiss us so much of these white professors. And they would like literally, if there was like a person that was not white that was presented, it was maybe like 70% less busy than the other like white professor, right? So it got me thinking about whose voices we privilege as women of color and like Black people, indigenous people, like whose voice do we validate? Whose voice do we listen to when there is like a choice?
Right.
If you were to be given the choice to attend a presentation by a white scholar at the same time that you are being given the choice to hear a presentation by an indigenous woman, like 99% of the time, the men that I remember chose the white scholar.
Absolutely.
And that happens, that continues to happen. There is a rush to cite white people more than indigenous people. There is also, and you know, I'm sharing this with you, but for everybody to hear, there's also this tendency that and I've seen that a lot of in the Latinx community, that they would get an idea from an indigenous woman or a woman of color, and they never recognize that shit.
Yeah. Oh no, they steal.
Like we have fallen into this trap of imitating the behavior of the oppressor.
Yeah.
Which is in essence basically like what Paulo Freire talks about all the time, right? About like when we're in positions of power, like oppressing somebody else because we are being oppressed. It's kind of like what you say in English, like redirecting the anger and being the punch bag of like people constantly. If I were to show you my inbox messages of like people coming on to me, and it's like, what else do you want from me? Do you want my arm?
Right.
Like what like, do you want me dead?
Right.
Like, it's like, what else do you expect? And this same expectation, they would never do that.
No.
To that, they will never speak to like that if they were addressing a white person. Never.
Never. Yeah. And I mean, it definitely happens in the Black community. You know, what I say is that, you know, when I talk about this dynamic in the Black community, what I say is some Black people that don't want to be free, they want to be white. And it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, so some folks have bought into this notion that whiteness, in all of its mediocrity, moral, imaginative, intellectual, cultural, and otherwise, is some type of goal.
Yeah.
And actually during my process, you know, I didn't say that it was white folks who were giving me the hard time. I did not mention a race. so you know, it's so entrenched. And actually, you know, actually my therapist had to, you know, part of what we worked on during this time was dealing, she has a perfect word for it. She said, those Black people are compromised. And a large part of my therapy had to be around how do I function among Black people who have been compromised. Because up to that point in my life, I had just naturally, you know, I'm a very spirit intuitive person with the people who I connect with. So up to that point in my life, I just naturally did, you know, I either like didn't know they existed or they weren't in my circle. But when you get into academia, right, there, you know, it's like a moth to a flame. You know, you have a high percentage of compromised Black folks who are attracted and you know, and gain a level, it's not even real power, right, but gain a level of power. You know, and they can keep it as long as they tame Black folks like me, right? That's part of the deal. So, but the idea that they're compromised was very helpful to me. And there are lots of Black folks who have been compromised.
I think Lark has, Lark, go ahead.
Sorry. I'm like always sorry. I've always wondered with men, Is it because of the lynching and the murdering? Like, the thing is that, you know, because I'm not trying to give people excuses, but I'm like, do you think that history of, you know, they did horrible things to us too, but the whole history of, if you don't behave, we'll murder you and you just disappear. Do you think that for men, that's more in their head? They would just, do you think that that might have something to do with the reason why they act this way around white men?
So I have two responses. One is, I think it's patriarchy.
Okay.
I think it's sexism, and with Black women it's misogynoir, right? You know, because Black men who fall into this category, in my experience, they don't act like that with white women.
Yeah.
Right? So misogynoir is the hate of Black women.
Yes.
Right? And so I think it's sexism. I think it's patriarchy. I think it's sexism. You know, I'm not, and right, I won't discount the history that you're talking about, because what I say is that, particularly with Black men, you know, the white power forces kill them fast, but it kills us slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So whereas, and we're certainly not exempt from lynching, right? So that's part of the story, is that, you know, babies and Black women and Black girls were lynched,
mm-hmm.
right? You know, so one, we don't really talk about that narrative as much because it's sexier, right, or more accepted to talk about those things. You know, but yes, I do want to recognize the historical difference between being killed fast
Mm-hmm.
and being killed slowly. You know, so they're going to kill us with the wage gap. They're going to kill us with poor maternal health. They're going to kill us, you know, with the diseases that like, white people literally make us sick. You know what I mean? So like the diseases that we get from like holding in and being stuffed down and things of that nature. You know, so I don't want to ignore that. And it's sexism. It's patriarchy. It's misogynoir.
Mm-hmm.
I want to check in with the time and how you're doing. If you maybe can take one more question, and then, you know, I want to, tell me how you're doing.
I'm good.
Yeah?
Yeah. This is my last thing of the day, so I'm good.
Oh my God. Okay, Jamilet, you're next. Go.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Patricia, I mean, this is like an amazing time for me to get answers. Something that I saw on TV on Friday, and my professor is somewhere here, and she's the one that has inspired me to learn more about all this, you know, white power and the actual forces behind racism and all the things there's here. But you're talking about Black men in academia acting against other Black people in academia. And I was actually watching Bill Maher on Friday, and I saw Professor John McWhorter is actually their name. I would love to hear your opinion about that, if you are up to date with that show on that was actually broadcasted on Friday, and what he spoke about of Black fragility. I would love to hear your opinion about that.
About James McWhorter?
This is the linguistic professor at Columbia.
I think I know.
Yeah.
I think I know who you're talking about. I haven't thought about it in a very long time. So, I think I know who you're talking about. I'm not up to date on. Yeah, I remember him. I kind of blocked him out a couple decades ago.
I laugh because he complains about this. He was actually saying that he was going to be kind of like incinerated after the show, something like that.
what I don't know the context. Can someone quickly tell me the context?
Yeah, basically, he was actually criticizing White Fragility's book. And of course, I mean, I got a little confused because this was a Black, professor, with a PhD in linguistic. I mean, I was like, I was so confused. So he was actually.
I would say the same thing I said to Gloria. Like, white power is so thorough. Yes, Gloria. Yeah. Since you're talking about a specific person, I won't go on record and say to fuck that person. But I would say, white power is so. It's so thorough, and it's frightening, right? I mean, you have to develop a level of courage to wake up every morning and be fully in touch with the power dynamic of this world, right? And so some of us take momentary breaks from it, and then some of us just break from it altogether and become delusional. And so like, and so. Yeah, it's bullshit. It's a defense. It's a defense. And people say, actually, the Sonia Renee Taylor. If you don't follow her on Instagram, she's amazing. Sonia Renee Taylor. What she said, this may help you, maybe an example. So when, oh my gosh, I'm so sad, I forgot the girl's name. Micaiah, the Black teenager who was shot 4 times in the chest by the police. Literally while they were reading the Chauvin trial verdict, the police, she had gotten into a fight in the community, 14-year-old Black girl in Columbus, Ohio. The police came and killed her, shot her 4 times in the chest. And there were actual Black men who were saying, oh, well, she shouldn't have been fighting. Yeah, and we were like, oh, bro, like really? We've been marching for the past 5-6 years for y'all, and you're coming out here saying Black men were saying, oh, well, this is okay. I mean, I'm simplifying, but they were trying to justify, and thankfully people called them on their shit, right? But Sonia Renee Taylor said, the thing about it is, then there were other people saying, well, she shouldn't have been fighting and yada, yada, yada. And what Sonia Renee Taylor, and I'm not going to say this brilliantly, she said it. She said, this, if you stay in touch with what's really going on with the white power force globally, right? It's hard, and it takes a level of courage. And so what people try to do is distance themselves, right? Mentally, they want to say, well, that couldn't have been me because my child wouldn't have been fighting, right? Or that couldn't have been me. And so it's this mental process of trying to really not face it, right? And so people go through great lengths to do that because it's very scary to wake up and say, it absolutely could have been you. With your degree, with your great parenting, in your neighborhood, it absolutely, that white power is so indiscriminate, and white violence is so indiscriminate, it absolutely could have been you or your child.
Yeah. And
that's very hard to deal with. And like I said, so some people take momentary breaks, and then some people just break altogether. Like some people just, it's a sick defense mechanism. And I say that it's sick because it puts other people in danger, especially if they're seen as the Black voice, or if they can be manipulated by white power to say, see, if you guys are just good like this person, right? And that's the part that makes it dangerous, because I can sympathize with a lack of courage, right? But I can't get with putting other people in danger because you lack courage. Shut the hell up, right? Get off the mic, but don't be out here loud and wrong, right? So that's what I will say. Does that make sense? I'm trying to think of a reference. I mean, I'm sure I know that some brilliant Black folks have written about that, internalized racism, those types of things. But I can't think of a ready reference. But yeah, you can find articles on internalized racism, and different things like that.
We'll take one more question. Hallie, please go ahead, and then we'll take a break.
Okay, I'm gonna really quick because I'm not Black. I'm not Black, I'm Latinx. So I mean, this is your conversation to lead and to drive and to, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say one thing that I noticed was when I watched that documentary about Rachel Dahlil, it was the Black men that were actually saying like, if she wants to be Black, let her. The Black women were very upset about it, but the Black men seemed to kind of be like, give her a pass, whatever. She wants to be Black that bad. So that really stunned me when I watched that documentary. I was like, damn, there's something going on there. But I don't know, I don't know the background, the history. So this is great. Just, I'm just learning. I'm just here to learn.
Yeah, it's wild. And also colorism plays into that as well, right? So this notion among Black and Latinx and Asian men that the lighter you are, well, not just men, people, but when you talk about this whole damsel in distress, because I think what they triggered is that damsel in distress thing, right? And so if you're dark, you can't be a damsel, right? So that's how colorism works, right? The lighter you are, the fairer, that's even where that term comes from, right? Which we don't use anymore, but the fairer you are, the more human you are, right? The more delicate you are, the more vulnerable you are, the more you warrant protection, right? And so there's a lot of shit going on there, but I don't want to exclude colorism, right? And even to a certain extent among, I don't know if you would call it colorism, but even among, European and European descendant folks, like blonde hair and blue eyes, right? People want to, get on people of color, but like European folks have a thing about blonde hair and blue eyes, and I think, I don't know, but I feel like there are some parallels around that might give, folks a hint around how colorism works, right? And so, what people will say, because it's like Rachel Dolezal, and then like those 3 or 4 women after that, right, recently who were white, and again, people come to their defense, and just quite honestly, one woman had the assessment, and she said, when you look at her as a white woman, she's just average. But because of colorism, if she then identifies as Black, then she's this light-skinned, exotic Black woman, right? And so they're trading on that too. It's a lot. It's a lot. But yeah, I think, and again, I won't say that I know exactly what's happening there, but I definitely feel like those are some elements of it. And I wouldn't have come up with that assessment, but look at all those women, right? They're just average look. Again, I don't want to be offensive or politically incorrect, but since we're being honest, since I told people to fuck themselves, since we're being, if you look at them, they're average looking white women, right? But because of internalized racism in our community, where anything light is seen as more beautiful among people of color, then all of a sudden, if you go from being an average looking white woman to possibly being this exotic, mixed race Black woman, you certainly get cachet, certainly among men, right, who haven't examined their colorism. And then you trigger that damsel in distress. Oh, well, you guys are being hard on her. Who knows? Yada, yada. It's all sick and crazy, y'all. Fuck them too.
I cannot wait for this session of coming to be over so you can come and we can have a barbecue and get drunk with wine and dance.
I'm coming. I love it.
Oh my God, yes. Okay. We are gonna let you go because you have been very generous with your time. And Lark, you had another question. I see the blue hand. No more blue? No. Oh, it was your didn't put it. Okay.
It was an old question. I already answered.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let us give a round of applause. Everybody turn on your camera if you're still around.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, what can I say? You said everything that needed to be said and more. So for the rest of you, I will see you at 7:25, and then we get 13 minutes. So 7:25 we'll be back. But thank you so much, Dr. Patricia, Akosua, Lesesne.
Yes.
Pleasure.
Thank you, my sister. And feel free to be in touch. I'll send my email address. I'm not real good on social media. Like Facebook is wonky, but I have some Instagram accounts that I check sometimes. But email is the best way. So please be in touch, because actually I've been thinking about Akib's question, and I think community is also important, right? We have to create. Ashan Crowley, one of my favorite thinkers, talks about creating an otherwise world and otherwise possibilities. And so, actually being intentional about building community among like-minded people is really important. So please be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.